2. Well. Okay, so I thought what I'd do, nobody signs up. Might review some of the stuff I've done here of late with the NFL. So let me go to this guy, and I'm going to share my screen here. I want to share. Okay, share. So this is some slides I put together that explains a little bit about sports modeling. And I'm going to go over a little bit of the background and then some preliminary results. Yeah. Hi. It's my grandson. What are you guys up to? Oh, I gotta close the door. I got a dog. All right. Okay, let's see. Your screen sharing. Okay. The idea is sports wagering is basically a stochastic activity. Oh, here, this has got to be in the NFL. Games are stochastic in the sense that each game has fundamentally two sources of uncertainty. Those sources are epistemic and aleatoric. Epistemic uncertainty is risk assessment that's based on fundamentals of the process. The process in this case being NFL, the framework within which NFL games are played and within which wagering takes place. So, for example, differences in teams are based on things like player-coach differences, weather conditions at the time of the game, strengths and weaknesses of each team, things of that ilk. You know, in particular, for example, it turns out that the differences in the capabilities of the quarterback make a large difference in who wins, who loses the game. An excellent example is look what happened in Baltimore this year, 2025. And aleatoric uncertainty is attributed to the unpredictable random nature of the game. And where some team play another team many times, even in under the same conditions, the scores will not always be the same. The variability in the scores are, in this case, are aleatoric. So what? Well, first of all, you have to recognize there's no such thing as a lock on the outcome of any one NFL game. The outcome of every game is a single instance. And so you might be able to, with statistics, predict trends, but it's very difficult to predict a single instance. So the epistemic and aleatoric uncertainties mean the outcome of the game cannot be predicted with certainty. But, these are statistics, and so a prediction may be made for any of the wager quantities, and some uncertainty associated with it. And the point is this: if the uncertainty is sufficiently small, then it might be worth placing a wager on. So, basically the best you can do is estimate the probability of a win-loss on any particular betting event in the NFL. And typical betting events are, you can bet with a spread, whether against a spread. If Kansas City is favored by 11.5 over Washington, you can say, okay, well, I bet Kansas City minus 11.5 is going to win the game, or I bet Washington plus 11.5 is going to win the game. And in either case, you typically have to lay 11 to win 10. Now that those numbers change here recently, books have recognized that balancing the action on each side may require, instead of having like, to put it in terms of 100, instead of 110 to win 100, maybe 102 to win 100 if you're looking at wagering on a dog, or maybe 118, 115 to win 100 if you're wagering on what is considered to be a personal favorite. And that can be, that type of wagering is done typically on the spread and also on over/under scores. Now on the money line, those numbers, those odds are specified specifically on that line. So the approach that I've taken, or that I propose for modeling the NFL, is to use a Bayesian approach. And by that I mean, oh man, specifically, can you spell that? S-P-E-C. Oh, F-I, specifically, uh, the probability, this is Bayes' rule, Bayes' law. If A is some event, and in this particular context, what I mean by that, A might be a proposition, like A is the proposition that A will cover the spread in a game, and B is evidence or data that you currently have about that game, and that would be past history for the last number of weeks, updates on injuries, updates on player trades, updates on things of that nature. Well, where the game is played, or what the home field advantage ought to be looking like there, that type of thing. So that's what B. So basically what this says is the probability that A will cover the spread, given some of this prior information, uh, given this new evidence, rather, it's B, is going to be the probability of B. In other words, the probability of the evidence that we have, given that the event A is true, times the prior probability of A. Now, prior probability of A simply means, well, okay, you have a lot of information, one loss record, you have the betting lines, you have a fair amount of information about the game. And so you maybe have some idea that ahead of time, Kansas City's probably going to beat Washington, particularly if they're playing at home. And then so this basically is a way to estimate the probability of Kansas City covering the spread, given some evidence that you have garnered from the previous some number of weeks worth of data. That's the whole idea behind the Bayesian prediction. And this is sort of a little bit of background on some of the statistics involved. Typically, it's 11 to 10 on a wager. You lay 11 to win 10. And it's become a little bit more sophisticated here of late. So it's usually 110 to win 100, but that number can vary from 100 to win 100 to 118, 120 to win 100 on any side bet. And for the most cases, if you're looking at, if you have to lay 11 to win 10, then that says your probability of winning is like 47%. And you've got to do better than 53% on terms of your probability predictions in order to make any money. So that's typically how those things work. Now, so what I've done is I have written some code, and we'll take a look at some results in the early part of the 2025 season that is based on betting lines that were published online from Las Vegas betting establishments, and that can be the casinos or some of the online professional betting places. And then we'll see how we can do against that. But here's typically where other information sources that are going to be used in assessing what has changed. And so this is kind of gauging okay, what's happened with the epistemic uncertainty. And that would say, uh, maybe we can look at some year-to-date teams statistics, player statistics. Uh, a, a team's quarterback may go out and somebody else may come in. Jalen Hurts is out, so the second string guy come in. He's not Jalen Hurts, so that would affect the game. And then what I'm doing is I'm using some past number of weeks to estimate what that information about the team is that I will be using as prior information. And there's a caveat here. Team characteristics are not constant. The team characterization changes over a period of 4 to 6 weeks. These things like injuries, trades, coaching changes, uh, all those will typically affect the performance of a team. So anytime you look at the data from, say, week 1 to the present, your information may be slightly outdated, maybe incomplete, maybe incorrect. So kind of what I'm thinking, or the way I approach this is, well, let's use only, say, the past 6 weeks worth of data. So what happened if I'm looking at making a forecast, say, for week 7, I'll use weeks 1 through 6, but if I'm working at making a forecast for week 8, I'll use the data from week 2 to week 7. And in so doing, I'm kind of using what I consider to be a little bit more relevant information for characteristics of the team to help develop the prior information. And another thing you got to keep in mind is that team information is always autocorrelated. So if there's no change in the quarterback from weekend to weekend +1, the quarterback rating is likely to be very close to in weekend -1 to what it was in weekend. The best quarterbacks don't suddenly drop from best to worst in 1 week without some kind of something happening, some kind of reason. So in general, you expect things like quarterback rankings, power ratings, anything associated with a week-to-week characterization of the team to be autocorrelated. Now that's kind of important because autocorrelation is something that you have to take into account if you're going to do a forecast. And by that I mean, if you're using ordinary linear regression, for example, I think it's popular to say, okay, well, I'm going to predict points scored for each team, or maybe I'm going to predict a team difference in points scored by looking at just a linear regression function based on many of the statistic ratings that are accumulated by all the pro football sites. So you've got tons of data about that. Now, the problem with that is that in so doing, you may be using data from weeks 1 to week's end, but those data that you're using to make that prediction are not independent. And so as a result, you have violated one of the primary tenets of linear regression. And as a result, you can go ahead and make a forecast, but the uncertainty associated with that forecast, the variance associated with that will be incorrect. And so you are potentially going to make a wrong decision. Okay, now, so basically here's how I propose to deal with that. And I'm going to use a Bayesian model to make these predictions. That was I think it was on slide 4 where we saw that. And the Bayesian model is implemented based on three tenets. Well, first of all, I use ELO ratings to estimate team relative strengths. Now, ELO is the rating that's was developed. I've forgotten what the guy's name is, but it's used to rate chess players. So if a weak player defeats a stronger player, then his ELO rating goes up when the stronger player's ELO rating goes down. Well, in a similar manner, you can assign a rating value to each team. And then look at the results of the games and then adjust that ELO rating based on the one lost aspects. And it isn't just have to be one loss, it can also be margin of victory. And by that I mean, if a weak team, the New York Jets, were to beat the Kansas City Chiefs by a large margin, that would significantly boost their ELO rating and significantly drop Kansas City's ELO rating. If Kansas City beats them by a small margin, 1 or 2 points, say, all right, well, then Kansas City would definitely drop a small amount of their ELO rating, and New York Jets would probably increase significantly in their ELO rating, but not nearly as much as if they had won by a large victory. So first thing is an ELO rating. Now, to use the Bayesian analysis, I'm going to take that ELO rating and I'm going to break teams into 3 categories, top, middle, and bottom. And that's going to be based on where they are in the ELO categories. And I do that by assuming that the ELO categories are logistic distributed. And I'll do a break at probably at 33% on the top, 33% in the middle, 34% in the middle, 33% in the bottom. And that would kind of break them into categories. And then I'm going to use I'm going to use characteristics of the teams in each category to formulate prior information for a Bayesian prediction. Now, another thing that I've implemented is an nth order markup process. And the team's performances week to week are not independent. You know, a team that is good has a tendency to win. A team that is not so good has a tendency to lose, no matter who they're playing. So what I've looked at is implementing an nth order Markov process that looks at just the one-loss record of the previous N games, and then based on that one-loss record across the entire NFL, what's the probability that a team would win the next game? And that would be setting up an nth order Markov process. And then, as an aside, here's another aspect of it. Yeah, part of what comes out of a Bayesian analysis is, as I pointed out, is that there are no locks. And so what you get is a probability that a particular team or a particular betting event will occur. And so the issue is, okay, well, how much money should I bet on that? I mean, if you think the probability is high, I think it's 80, 90% that Kansas City is going to cover against Washington if they're playing in Kansas City. Well, probably ought to bet more than if I think it's only, 55, 60% that Kansas City is going to cover against Washington, Kansas City at home again. So there's a procedure called the Kelly criterion that basically says you size the bet predicated upon maximizing the long-term expectation of the growth of the geometric growth rate. And you can derive the formula, but the bottom line is right here. The percentage of your bankroll that you want to deal with, that you'd like to bet, is the probability of covering, the probability of the event that you want to bet on, minus the 1 minus p, which this is the probability they win. 1 minus p is the probability they lose. That's q. Divided by, that's 1 minus p is the probability they lose. Divided by q, which is the odds for your winning predicated upon the bookmaker. So an example right here, let's suppose that the odds are 11 to 10 and required to win the rate. The book odds are 11 to 10. And if you figure the percent of a team covering or winning on that particular event, like I think this probability is 0.78, that Kansas City minus 11.5 will cover over Washington. Then how much should I bet? Well, P is 0.78, 1 minus P is 0.22, and the 0.476 are the bookmaker odds. That what I'm going to get back. In other words, it's 100 or 110 on that bet. And so that basically, if you put that in the formula, it says the correct amount to wager for your particular bankroll would be 31% of what you have available for that. So every bet you're going to see in these forecasts was made based on the Kelly criterion. All right, so let's take a look at some observations from the 2025 season. Now, in every case, the betting odds that you're going to see in the results I present were taken from internet football betting services. Now, most of the time, these services typically do not use the standard lay 11 to win 10 odds for over, under, and side bets. For purposes of this presentation, I consistently used 11 to win 10. There's usually no two books are exactly the same, and you can shop the odds around, that type of thing. So now, the other thing is data from previous seasons was not used in these predictions. And by that, I mean, starting with 2025, that's a blank sheet. I don't use any information from 2024. Teams are different. Everything is different. So particularly in a league where coaches are coming and going, players are coming and going, there's drafts, you get new players coming in that are great, you get new players coming in that are busts. So start fresh. So basically now what I'm going to use, I've got to use about 6 weeks worth of data in order to build sort of confidence in what the teams are looking like. So what I'm going to do to make a forecast is if I make a forecast for week N, I'm going to look at the data from weeks N-7 to week N-1 to make the predictions, because those weeks N-7 to N-1, those data will provide me with information that I can use in my prior estimations for Bayesian estimation. Now, of course, betting odds always include the over-under side bets with and against the spread, and in the money line, the betting odds are already there. And then here's kind of what goes on. Based on the Bayesian procedure, can I identify cases where the betting odds are not consistent with the predicted odds of an event? Bayesian predicted odds do not guarantee a win. Keep that in mind. Predicted odds are never 100%. So that goes along with there is no such thing as a lock in the NFL. Now, bookmakers will typically set about a 5% advantage. The best that can be done is to do a better job at making predictions to beat their 5% juice. And you can compute that 5% juice. It shows up on the 11 to win 10. And also, if you look at the implied odds from the money line, you can see the implied odds typically are about a 5% book advantage. All right. So this is the Kelly formula, and this is an example. They explain a little bit more about why I use the 6-week sliding window to make the prediction. And I'd like to point out at this juncture that all of the results that I have, I think in here I've got weeks 7 and 8. Maybe I'll put week 9 in as well. They're based on the assumption that I have a $100 bankroll and I'm playing with. And so the percentages are percent of 100, so it's just $1. So if it said bet 71% of your bankroll, I'd bet $71. Another thing to consider is that the odds never give you even money. So what I've done is in every case I've rounded off how much I bet and what the return is to the nearest dollar. That's just to make the computation simple. Okay, so this is sort of the caveats I just mentioned. All wagers are based on the return odds. I return 100 on my bet of 110, except for the money line where the odds are that are actually given. And once again, those are never the same across all teams and all booking establishments. And then the wager and bet returns are rounded off to the nearest dollar. And every team is given with odds taken from internet gambling sites. So I didn't shop for odds. I just went someplace and grabbed one that and was fairly consistent and ran with that as the odds. Now, when I give the results associated with each game, I'm going to explain which bets I made and then the final results, and then I'll give you for each game the one lost that I have made in terms of dollars. So, and now, as I mentioned earlier, week 7 is used. Week 7 data uses weeks 1 through 6 as prior information for the Bayesian prediction. So as you can see, what that means is I can't do any prediction in weeks 1 through 6 because I don't have prior information. I'm not going to use previous data as information. And I'm kind of reluctant just to take sports writers or any of that kind of stuff that publications. I'm reluctant to use that. And then subsequently for predictions week 7 through the end of the season, I will always use the previous 6 weeks data to establish the priors to do the predictions. All right, let's take a look at week 7 summary. Now, in every case, what I've done is you can identify here. This game was Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. The line was Cincy plus 5.5. The over-under number was 43.5. The money line was Pittsburgh minus 275, Cincy plus 225. Now, you could have shopped that around and found different numbers, but that's what I used. And then when I've used data from weeks 1 through 6, used a Bayesian approach to predict that, this is what the predictions were. It said, bet the over 43.5, and the amount to bet is $15 to win 14. Take Pittsburgh minus 5.5, bet 26 to win 24. And the money line, bet Pittsburgh, so that's 67 to win 24. The result was Pittsburgh 31, Cincy 33. So everything lost. Whole thing lost. So the net result was I lost $79 that first week. Now, LA Rams at London. The line was LA Rams versus Jacksonville. The line was Jacksonville plus 3. The over number 45. Money line was LA minus 130, Jacksonville plus 125. Predictions were Jacksonville to win, and that was 30 to win 38, under 45, and then wager 83 to win 75, and take Jacksonville plus 3, win 50 to win 45. And the final result was LA Rams 35, Jacksonville 7. So the under won, but Jacksonville lost and Jacksonville plus 3 lost. So the net result there was a minus $5. Let's go find one. That's the idea how all of this was done. Let me show you one where I actually, here it. Eagles versus the Vikings in week 1. The line was Minnesota plus 2. Over under was 43.5. Money line was minus 130 plus 110. Now, the forecast from the Bayesian approach was take the over, $32 to win 29. Take Eagles minus 2. And pretty strong feeling about the Eagles, 78 to win 72. And said take Philadelphia just to win outright, 78 to win 60. The results was Philadelphia won outright. So you win each of those bets, and the net result is $161. All right, so let's you can look at the each of those week 7 wagers, and then what I've got here is a summary for week 7. So the net result was some games. What's the most lost here? It looks like the biggest loss was $135, New England at Tennessee, and the biggest win looks like 161, Philadelphia, Miami. And the net result was, if you put together all the bets across all 16 games, I came ahead to $114. Now, presumably, if all of the odds established by the bookmaking guys were correct, then I should, however much I lose, I should in the long run kind of wind up losing about 5%. So This may not be a consistent result. Remember, this is a single instance, doesn't prove anything. Well, let's go look at what happened in week 8. So same idea. You can see here that Minnesota, the LA Chargers, I predicted under 44.5, and I thought it was pretty strong, $91 to win 83. Took Minnesota plus 3.5, 77 to win 70. Took Minnesota to win, 47 to win 62. Result was Chargers win, so I lost every one of those. So that was a net loss of 215 bucks. But by the same token, let's see if I've got one here. Here we go, Miami and Atlanta. The under was 44.5. And what I did is I said, okay, the 41.5 was the over under number. I said, let's take under 44.5. And I was pretty confident on that one, 95 to win 87. Take the Dolphins plus 7. Again, fairly confident, 94 to win 85. And Miami to win outright. Because they're underdogs, they had a fairly large money line, and that was 68 to win 209. And the result was Miami beat up on Atlanta pretty well, so I wound up making $381 on that particular prediction. So the overall for week 8, you can see is here. And week 8, what's my biggest loss in here? Looks like it was Minnesota, the Chargers, I lost 215. And the biggest win looks like it was Miami at Atlanta, 381. So those are came ahead. So I did 2 weeks, 2 weeks I've made money, but it doesn't prove anything. Over a long run, 2 weeks is just too small a sample to make any kind of judgment. But here you go. Here's some week predictions I'm going to make. And then you can take a look at these predictions and see how well these things turn out. Now, I'm doing this on November 1st, and the games are tomorrow, November 2nd. So you can take a look at what actually happened. Now, the Thursday night game, I took, what was it, Baltimore at Miami. I took under 51.5. I took Miami plus 7.5. And it turns out that the forecasting software, the Bayesian analysis, said, yeah, you know what, the probabilities of that you predict for a money line straight line win are not sufficient to overcome the odds that the bookmakers are giving in that, so there's no bet. And so what happened was the result was Baltimore 28, Miami 6. So the under won, but Miami plus 7.5 lost. Okay, so the net there was minus $5. But here are the remainders. So what you might want to do at this point, stop the YouTube, take a look at those things, write down the predictions, and then you can see, did I win, did I lose? And I'll show you the next set of games. There's the balance of them. You can take a look at that, stop the YouTube, and then just write down the predictions, and you can see what happened. All right. And then what I'll do is I'll do a follow-up YouTube video that explains how all these things worked. And I think that's all I'm going to do for this right now. All right, so let's see, let's